Hey, everybody. Happy New Year's. It is 2019, and we are hitting the ground running with a live stream the day of. As the year turns, we are ready to go. And as always, it is so much fun to discuss new material, and this fandom is brimming with lots of great takes, especially with so much new things to digest. And with that, keeping in with our trend of getting lots of different takes from lots of different people, we have some great guests lined up for you all today. We are, of course, going through the book in order. We're jumping around a little bit, but we have lots of different things to talk about. So today, our guests are people that I imagine you all have heard of. And if you haven't, then what are you doing with your lives? Both of these two have fantastic podcasts that I am a fan of on my own and very happy to spread the word about. So let's start off with returning guest. Both of y'all have been here before, but frequent returning guest, Lady Gwyn of Radio Westeros. Hey, Lady Gwyn, how you doing?
Hello, I'm great. Happy New Year. Great to be here today. It's been a while since I've joined you for one of these, and excited to talk some Fire and Blood with you all.
Yeah, it's been a while because we didn't have a Game of Thrones TV season. That's our normal collaboration, recurring collaboration. But we also are working on Dance of the Dragons together. It'll be our first fully scripted collaboration. We've collaborated a little bit here and there on scripted stuff, but it's usually just one of us helping the other with a project. This is the first time we've really worked together on something that's really good. It's going well. We've got a lot of the early pre-dance stuff written, and the rest is outlined. So we're not sure when that's coming out, but it should be fun. What else do you guys have coming up from Radio Westeros?
Well, we just released our first episode on the Dunk and Egg Tales. So that was last month. I'm currently working on the Soren Sword. Should be coming out sometime later in this month. And once we make our way through that, who knows what? Like you said, Dance of the Dragons. Who knows what'll come after that?
Right on. Cool. Well, I'm sure it'll be good, whatever you guys decide to do. Our other guest is from the podcast Girls Gone Canon, as well as Drunk, A Song of Ice and History. Drunk, A Song of Ice and Fire History. Who's drunk now? Apparently me. But so, hi, Chloe. Good to see you. And also, of course, I should also say that you are one of the co-organizers of Ice and Fire Con. So
yeah, I do a lot of staff work for Ice and Fire Con. That's coming up end of April. So if you guys haven't heard about it, check it out online. Aziz, Ashea, Lady Gwyn, they all actually come out to Ice and Fire Con now. I think Lady Gwyn, this will be your second annual. So, just going to call it that. It's really second time, but makes it sound fancier. But yeah, we all hang out at that. That's really fun. And yeah, Girls Gone Canon, we're doing point of view by point of view character analysis, chapter rereads. We right now are on Sansa Stark. We just had Lady Gwyn on for the end of Storm of Swords. And we're actually having Ashea on in a couple weeks here for Elaine too. So we are really excited for that. I do that with Eliana. You might know her from Maester Monthly podcast and also from Reddit, A Song of Ice and Fire forum.
Right on. Very cool. Yeah, so definitely check out Girls Gone Canon if you haven't yet. They launched the show. I almost said this year. That's that time of year where we misspeak about what year it is. So I'm getting that started right away too. So yeah, check them out. I really enjoy their discussions, and it's a really cool tweak to the chapter reread format, going by POV. So you really get to dig deep into each character, which is I particularly appreciate that. That's one of the things we like to do with our show in a different way, is to really hone in on individual parts of the story and focus on that. So yeah, that really speaks to me. So let's see here. Let me tell you guys what we're going to talk about today, and we'll do a couple of announcements, and then we'll get to it. One of the things we're with cutting off new material here, coming out with new material. It's also going to be a challenge for us with Thrones of Winter. It's going to be a bit of a challenge for us in season 8 because the episodes are longer. Is that we don't always know how much we can fit into a 2-hour episode. So what we're going to try to do is try to focus on a few major topics, have a couple extra topics for if we have time for them, and then kind of move on from there. As in, whatever we didn't do last time, we'll do next time. So with that in mind, what we're going to try to do this time is we're going to talk a little bit about Aegon the Uncrowned vis-a-vis the succession issues, because I think succession issues are going to be a big part of A Song of Ice and Fire. And that's one of the things that Fire and Blood is really going to teach us, is how these situations with multiple claims, multiple Targaryens can get handled. Because we all know there's quite a bit of that coming in A Song of Ice and Fire, both with Jon, with Dany, and with young Griff. So we're also going to talk about the fall of Maegor in that same light, because that also raises a lot of succession questions, as well as some other interesting questions that go along with that. Then we're going to talk about Jaehaerys' minority, the early days before he was king, as Alysanne comes onto the stage as well. She comes a little bit later because she's a little bit younger, but she certainly makes her presence felt very quickly, and we'll have a lot to say about her. That's going to include talking about Sept and Moon. We're going to talk about Rogar and Alyssa and Rhaena. And of course, the fact that Rhaena is older, is the eldest of the of Aenys' kids, is really relevant. And the Golden Wedding, and then the new Tower of Joy, which I think it's just a working title a lot of us have given to it. It's Jaehaerys and Alysanne kind of standing down with the Kingsguard against Rogar's attempt to keep them from getting married. Has a lot to do with Tower of Joy, and I think and something to remember about the Tower of Joy as we move towards this is that George is going to have to re-explain it. All we've seen of it so far is Ned's flashbacks on it. But it's got to be seen by other people. We're either going to have Bran seeing it in visions, or Howland Reed explaining it to somebody, or both. And so George has to figure out how he's going to tell us those stories. So that's part of why this is super relevant. Last episode, I suggested, or maybe it was the one before, I suggested that we would be talking about how the Targaryen family tree was retconned. We may not get to the shivers, which I hope to get to today, but if we don't, we'll definitely talk about the retcon of that tree, because I don't want to leave that hanging for another episode after we've done that already. So, anyway, that's what we're going to get to today. Hopefully we get to all of that. If not, we'll move some of it to the next. As always, these are Tuesday at 6, and every other Friday we have a Crusader Kings 2 stream, which... Hey, how fun. One of our guests here today is also a player of the Game of Thrones mod for Crusader Kings 2. Chloe, do you have any fun recent Crusader Kings 2 stories that you can share?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, it's all Ashaya's fault. She ruined my life. Ashaya told me when the day that it was free, that day on Steam it was free, and I spent like maybe $60 on DLC last month when it was on sale. I don't want to talk about it. No, I just played as Aegon the Conqueror for the first time. I hadn't played as him before. I kind of thought it was too god moddy, and it is a little like he shows up and like half of everyone's like, yeah, you're scary. We're just gonna bend the knee and just live our lives still, But then there's a couple wars, but it turned out fun. I did some fun stuff there, but House Dayne just took Dorne. We're talking like 130 AC-ish, and House Dayne is now in control of all of Dorne, and they're royal, as it should be, so it's going good.
I like that timeline. Hey, that's good alternate reality there, yeah. So before we get too deep, or before we get any deep, rather, we're still getting started here. I want to see if not just from my guests, but you all in the chat, as always, feel free to ask questions, but I want to hear what people's A Song of Ice and Fire New Year's resolutions are, whether you plan on doing some rereading, or whether you plan on writing, or if you're in the creative space, recording something in particular, or maybe you haven't thought about it. I'm just curious if anyone's does that sort of thing. So, Lady Gwyn, is that something you've thought about at all, or are you not a resolution type person? Or
I don't make a lot of resolutions, but I'll let y'all in on a little secret. Right at the moment, I am in between jobs. So my immediate resolution for January is to focus very strongly on creating content. So,
heck yeah.
Yeah. So I have lots of time on my hands, so I'm going to be writing lots.
It's definitely one of those your loss is our gain kind of situations, I suppose.
Yeah.
Sorry, but yeah.
It'll work out.
Yeah, right on. And what about you, Chloe? What's your do you have a resolution or any like particular goals for 2019 with regards to the community and fandom?
Yeah, I have a couple of writing pieces that they've just been hanging out. Like they're supposed to happen someday, and the bones are all there, and actually a lot of the flesh is there. We're just looking for some minute details, like maybe, just some sculpting of the flesh, maybe just like kick my own ass to do it. It's just, there's a lot going on. So we'll see. My goal is finish. There's 2 pieces I really want to finish this year. I'm just banging them out soon, hopefully. Cool. Fingers crossed. They're really fun, though.
That's awesome.
Really fun.
Can you tease anything about them, or are they secret?
Yes, one I have to get out sooner than the other because it's time, and the book might come out if I don't. So it's one of those. I'm on a time thing here. I'm like sitting there like, George, go slower. I'm just kidding. But it is has a lot to deal with. Has a lot to deal with the Dornish plot in The Winds of Winter and Aegon's plot in The Winds of Winter, and kind of an idea of a second sack of King's Landing that could be happening soon. So
yeah,
the other one is an Ashara Part 3 piece that just is sitting there, and it's a part I don't care about. It's got stuff about Ned Stark, and I'm just like, I don't care about this right now. So
there may not be a bigger fan of Ashara Dayne in the entire fandom. If you didn't know, well, now you do, folks. Chloe is fan number 1 of Ashara. Okay, so that's cool. Yeah, so hopefully other people are sharing their thoughts in the chat. Ashaya is monitoring that as best as possible. And Ashaya is still the best, even in 2019. We're continuing that trend as well. So, yeah, trend worth continuing. I want to give a couple quick shout outs, and then we'll get going. Our Facebook group is very active. We have lots of great discussions happening in general, but especially now that Fire and Blood is out, there's even more discussions happening. And it's a great place to be. Thanks very much to the mods that keep our group running smoothly and nice and clean and without any sort of trolling. We don't really have that much of that problem. This is a good community for that. But when such small problems come up, they are there to take care of it. So thanks very much to the mods. That is Scott and Thomas and Rebecca and Laura and Jennifer. I believe I named everybody. So thanks to everybody. And Ari, of course, I forgot. I almost forgot. And thanks to some of our patrons who keep our show active and feasible on the financial end. Very, very helpful, very useful, very important. We wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. So here's our thanks to Jeff Gnarly, the Long Snapper, History of Westeros' First Sword, as well as a couple of our dragon riders. We have Talanis the Talon, King of Gargassos, Rider of Telarius, a red dragon with scales, horns, and talons of midnight black. Speaking of Gargassos, I expect to record the Gargassos episode within the next 8 to 9 days. It is very close to done, so that should be fun. Lots of blood magic stuff in there, lots of stuff from Fire and Blood as well. Also, Robert IV of House Ardeacor, Burned King of Blazewater Bay, Rider of Atroxus, a black dragon with bioluminescent spots like smoldering embers and a banded blue tail. You can sign up for Patreon at patreon.com/Westeros History. We have lots of benefits for members, including bonus episodes, shout-outs, and scripts, and getting access to episodes before their release dates. So check that out if you are so inclined. All right, that is all the announcements and preamble. Let us get this deep discussion underway. So let us start with a couple of things from the last episode, which is fun because we get to let you all guests weigh in on a couple of things that, well, you weren't here last week, so you didn't get to weigh in on some of those things. But some of these questions are things that are very open in the fandom right now, so as many takes as possible is a good thing. One thing is a little bit of confusion that I think a lot of people didn't notice. I didn't even notice it, is that in the Kingsmoot chapter, the way it's written, it seems as if it's one horn blast, if read a certain way, but it also kind of seems like 3. He writes the horn blast sound 3 different times, but it's sort of written as if it's one long sound. So people have interpreted it multiple ways. However, I think the correct interpretation is 3 blasts, because Victarion remembers it that way. And that chapter was written after. So a lot of times you can see that as like a meta, like George is clarifying that this was 3 blasts. Do you guys have anything to add to that, or is that is that how you see it too, or is something else to it?
Yeah, I mean, and also rule of 3. I mean, 3 and 7 are the 2 power numbers in A Song of Ice and Fire. So rule of 3 in general is a writing tool.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. I mentioned last episode that it was interesting, possibly noteworthy, that Visenya, when she married Maegor to, I forget which one, Alice Haraway, I think it was, they did the Valyrian-style marriage rather than marriage under the 7. And commenter John P. suggested that maybe as the eldest, it was kind of her duty to keep alive some of those cultural traditions, which, that's a good theory. I think there's other circumstances. You know, they kind of, for one thing, I think a Septon wasn't going to do the marriage. They just refused. So that was part of it. But I think that's also, an opportunity for her to keep those traditions going. Do y'all have any thoughts on Valyrian cultural traditions or that marriage in general? Ceremony, that is.
Well, I think the idea of raising the idea there of a marriage, two different types of marriages being performed, could be relevant in the main series or slightly before the main series.
Yeah, Melisandre married Sigorn and Alice with a bit of a little Relorism thrown in there. So that's a good point. What do you think, Chloe?
Yeah, I think it's something that we're going to see played with later on when we get into a little bit of the Alysanne and Jaehaerys talk with their marriage and how it took place and different things. So I definitely want to bring this up again later, but it's an interesting theme that George keeps looping around in these chapters. So like Lady Gwyn said, I'm pretty sure it's going to mean something eventually. Maybe.
Cool. Woolly Ivan, YouTube commenter, suggests maybe the Valyrian steel armor could be protection against the other's weapons. Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, it's magical probably, and so is their stuff. So that could be. I would be very curious to see what happens when those two clash, both people and others and their weapons. So I like that idea. I don't know. We have much to say about it other than good possibility. Jacqueline Hemmings wants to know if Fire and Blood might be mentioned in World, because it is written by Maesters in World. It is a history book in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. It's not just for us. The same question came up with the World of Ice and Fire, and well, we haven't had a new full novel since either of these have come out. So I could see one or maybe both. Probably not both. That might be a little too much. But what do you guys think? Yes or no? Will we take a guess? If you had to guess, will we hear of either Fire and Blood or the World of Ice and Fire being mentioned in the Winds of Winter or in the Dream of Spring potentially?
Oh yeah, I mean, on a meta level, like maybe this could be a book where Sam reads something about Valyrian marriages being done versus different types of marriages. I mean, we're sitting here making it a hint that we're thinking about. I mean, meta level, you might see Sam find out about it. You might have Daenerys in her stack of books find out about it. I don't know.
Right on. That's true. That's very true. What do you think, Lady Gwyn?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I was actually going to mention that stack of books because I don't think we know what those books are.
Nope.
So, who knows? It could be one of these two.
Cheers to mysterious stacks of books. Yes, that is
my favorite kind.
Yes, that is a wonderful thing. Those are
books.
Nice. Okay, so that is covers all the questions. One other thing, I made a comment about the Immaculate Conception last episode, and a few people didn't like that. So I apologize for anyone that was upset by that. I was trying to make a word. It was just a attempt at wordplay, but yeah, bad idea. So sorry for that, guys. All right, so let's move on to the death of Aegon the Uncrowned, the first major topic of today. Now, of course, like I said, a reason this is important is we may see some parallels to the way the succession boils down, as well as we could see some parallels with some of the things with regards to dragons, as well as a lot of things. Well, let's just get into it. We'll start at the point where he and Rhaena, his sister wife, are hiding at Casterly Rock, where Lady Jocasta Lannister notices that Rhaena is pregnant. That's eventually going to be Aerea and Rhaella. And meanwhile, we have the realm is just in chaos with poor fellows all over the place attacking people and upset with Maegor and upset with the Targaryens in general. This is well before this has all been resolved. And of course, Rhaena doesn't have her dragon with her at this point. She gets Dreamfire later, and Aegon doesn't have a dragon at all. So early on, this is very familiar to Dany, of course, because she's traveling around and people are offering her help, but they definitely have something they want from her as well. It's definitely not just compassion. So, Lady Gwyn, we'll start with you. Do you see some of these parallels or other parallels to Dany? And maybe let us know if you see some other parallels as well.
Yeah, no, I see the parallels there, and the strings attached to everything. And they don't have their dragons. Dany didn't have dragons, or later she had dragons, I guess, and they were too small. Just that sense of being kind of at everyone's mercy. And that's, yeah.
It's not just about having this power and the stuff that you want, they don't just want your dragon and they don't just want your eggs. They want your blood. Like, they literally want that. They want to marry you and have your kids. And that's kind of creepy, if not really creepy. Chloe, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, it's a complete power thing. It's a claim. It's the kid. It's the blood. They want all of that. And especially we see it a lot with these female Targaryens throughout these books, even the badass warrior ones, that it all boils down to they were Targaryens in the end. And, you know, whether you speak to the right lord or whether your family, when they have the throne, they go in the royal process and people like them, you know, it's kind of your fingers crossed if you're up a stream, you know, with only small dragons.
Right on. Good take. So meanwhile, while they're chilling at Casterly Rock and some of these other spots, just trying to wait out the chaos, Alyce Haraway and Tiana of Pentos arrive from overseas with 600 sellswords, and this is something we talked about a little bit last episode. But this is, you guys may not know, I had some audio issues at the beginning of last episode, so I didn't get to weigh in as much on Maegor. So I wanted to throw a few things out, not exactly what we talked about last time, but a few other things, and also gives you guys an opportunity to weigh in as well. So little two-pronged attack here. So basically, there's a lot of fishiness around Maegor and Tiana and Visenya. And it's even fishier the deeper you look. Of course, the basic idea is that that Maegor is out for 28 days after taking a head wound. And the very day Visenya dismisses the maesters and lets Tiana take over, he gets up. Like, what? Like, that's not medicine, right? Like, the day of? Like, come on. So it's really fishy. Yeah, what do you guys think about this? Is this just like blatant magic, or am I going a little over with that? Or and what do you think? Does this relate to some other stuff? I mean, obviously Gregor is a tie-in, but what about other characters who come back? Like, is there anything we read into Jon here, or anything? Any other undead characters, like maybe Beric or Catelyn?
Wait, Jon's coming back?
Rumor has it.
What?
I feel like I missed out on something. What book was this in? No, I mean, Jon's going to take 3 days, you know, as the savior and all. So I'm just saying, Melisandre needs to get shapen up here with Tiana.
3 days. That makes sense. What do you think, Jen?
I can't help but wonder, because I'm always suspicious of everyone, really. I'm suspicious of sorcery. And I actually wondered about the maesters, that, like, you know,
maybe they wanted him to keep. Okay, I like that idea.
Maesters doing? Were they actually, keeping him? Maybe eventually they were going to be like, oh, whoops, we lost him.
That's a great take, because who wanted him to wake up other than like Visenya and a few other people? I mean,
the people that woke him up. I mean, and they show up and he wakes up the next day. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a Targ only a mother could love.
Right?
Well, so true.
Yeah.
So true. So he gets up, shows his face to the crowd, and then immediately goes to burning warrior sons in the Sept on Rhaenys' Hill, and then heads out to kill more poor fellows, which gets us the naming. There's that big battle where we get the naming of Bitterbridge, and then we get yet another mention of yet another comparison to Gregor that I hadn't made before, even though there are so many. In this case, we have Maegor chopping the limbs off of Wat the Hewer and keeping him alive, compared to Gregor and Vargo Hoat. Yeah, so there you go. Right on. At least Wat didn't have to eat himself. That we know of.
Small mercies.
But I also want to point out, in relation to this Maegor black magic stuff, that we have not once but twice in Fire and Blood do we have an offhand comment about, if by some sorcery your uncle Maegor were to rise from the grave. That comment, in this case it was after Jaehaerys has been training a lot, and Jaehaerys is starting to be a good fighter, which is something that a lot of us didn't really suspect, because we were kind of told in the World of Ice and Fire and other books, we kind of hinted at that he wasn't this kind of guy, but apparently Jaehaerys was also a warrior. And so that quote was from his master of arms. He says, if by some sorcery your uncle Maegor were to rise from the grave, like, okay, so George just threw that line out there at random, huh? That wasn't meaningful at all, was it? And then a very similar line comes out with Balerion, when Balerion comes back with Arrhea, and we hear, many thought that Maegor had risen from the grave to mount Balerion once again. It's like, okay, so he threw that in there twice. All right, so that's pretty strong. So now Maegor marries Tiana and has 3 wives. And some interesting things here about this that I wanted to get you guys' takes on. One is that he has this multiple marriage. It's the creepiest thing. I just kind of missed this before, or maybe it wasn't in Sons of the Dragon. I don't know. That he has the ceremony amongst the ash and bones of the warrior's sept that he just torched. Like, that's where he has his wedding. Like, it's literally like a wedding from hell, right? Like,
Yeah.
And, but then we hear that Visenya didn't like Tiana, which is peculiar given her success at bringing Maegor back. So, and Visenya was right, though, wasn't she, to not trust Tiana? So, what do you guys think about that? Was Visenya did she kind of read her, or was it more? Do you think there was more to it, or?
Yeah, I think mother's intuition, and maybe sorceress to sorceress.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Mom intuition. They have eyes in the back of their heads. Like, that's a legal thing that happens when you turn into a mom. They're good. And like, if you're a Velaryon mom, I mean, you got to have some tricks up your sleeve. You've avoided a lot.
So there's a few other things here to lay some groundwork. Speaking of, this is almost literally laying groundwork. Maegor, throughout all this, whether he's the Walking Dead or not, he's still acting like a king in some way or another. Although less so once Visenya dies. But he an interesting thing he does is he commands the building of Maegor's holdfast, and then he redoes some of the tunnels. So these tunnels, of course, are a huge deal. Varys uses them a lot, and one day I would really like to find out how did Varys learn the secret to the tunnels? Because we know that at one point the rat catcher Cheese knew his way around them, but then after that incident, all the rat catchers were killed and replaced with cats, so that no person would be able to do that anymore. So how did the secrets pass down from that era, from whoever to get to Varys? I don't know that we could possibly answer that question, but do you guys have any thoughts on that, or is that just something we're not meant to know?
Cats.
The cats actually arranged it all.
Not kidding. No,
build the tunnels. What are you talking about?
They're pulling all the strings. But I mean, someone like, look at Bloodraven, or any, someone like Bloodraven, sort of skin changing into a cat, learning these secrets, and maybe this is a way that they become known to others and passed down to someone. Who knows? Or he's just a really good, puzzle solver.
It could be. He may have just put a lot of effort into it. Just really dedicated. Just checked every brick, pull it in, pull it out, shift it left, shift it right, tap on it 3 times. Okay, next brick.
To be fair, like, Tiana probably used these tunnels, obviously, since she was doing things for Maegor. I mean, I'm sure in her confession, the tunnels may have even come out. How would she have crept around the castle? I feel like it's like a master of whisperers learn this information kind of every time. Yeah.
That makes sense. That does make sense. That's also, by the way, kind of an interesting thing to mention real off as an aside, is that Tiana is kind of mentioned as the first master of whispers. Like, that wasn't a thing until she came along, and she kind of became that. And it kind of became a position because of her, almost. It seems like they saw that, hey, that's useful, except when they turn on you and poison your wives. But other than that, that was she knew a lot of things. I mean, she found Rhaena Rhea and Rhaena hiding in the wherever they were hiding, wherever her mother had them hid during Maegor's wedding. They were introduced as if during the ceremony.
It was so sad.
That was sad.
Such a bummer.
Dang.
Like, Rhaena's been through so much, and like the second he's like, you thought you could hide them from me, you're like,
So meanwhile, poor Aegon the Uncrowned is still stuck out in the West at all this time, but his daughters are born. So we get a sense of how long it's been, because he and Rhaena have their kids, and that I did say Rhaella, didn't I? Yeah, Rhaena, didn't I? I meant to say Rhaella and Aerea. So, these Targaryen names. And so that gives us a sense of how long they were trapped at Casterly Rock, almost a full term of pregnancy. And we get all these interesting poor fellows running around with some interesting names, some that are telling. We have, of course, Septon Moon, who we're going to talk about in more detail a bit later, but Poxy Jane Poor, which is, to me, I don't know what the deal is with that. That's just one letter off from being Jane Poole. But this character doesn't seem to have much in common with Jane Poole, one of the saddest figures in all of the story. What did you guys take from that? Was there anything, or is it just a similar name? I wasn't really sure what to read of that. Because she's really savage. Like, that's what she said. She's like a savage, like, vindictive. I could see someone having gone through what Jane Poole has gone through, becoming really vindictive, but I don't know that her story is heading that way.
Yeah, I don't think she is. I think it figured was just one of those things that's just a similarity, but God, what
if anything, they both have like, she's poxy, so Jane Poole has, her nose is frostbitten, so there is that kind of connection too. Just a physical malady, but otherwise I think it's just a fun little, like, what if I made a character? I could call her Jane Poor. She's probably gonna die sadly too and hurt you, so really she's savage, whatever.
So we have, while Maegor and Visenya are ordering all this building project, they start to, once that's underway, they head out and they start to get nasty. They start to burn lots of the Riverlands and the Westerlands. Each one goes to one and burns lots of it. And they divide the work up. This includes the killing the family of Sir Joffrey Doggett, the Red Dog of the Hills, which, having his family killed by the Targaryens, that's going to come up big later when Jaehaerys takes the crown. So I wanted to make sure that was the stage was set for that. So they head for Old Town. Both of the dragons head for Old Town. And of course the city freaks out. They're like, holy crap, Maegor's coming, and his mom's coming too, and she's not exactly a nice person either. But everyone in Old Town's kind of like, we could surrender, except for this High Septon's like, he's a true believer. He's a zealot. But somehow he dies in the night. This is something we covered in Sons of the Dragon. We don't need to really rehash this. I just wanted to keep our details straight. The point is, they stay there for 6 months, kind of rearranging things after this almost certain poisoning and this new High Septon who's a lot more amiable. And while that's happening, this is the point we wanted to get to, Aegon takes his chance. He says, okay, well, they're down in Old Town. We can't do anything without a dragon. So they sneak into King's Landing in a scene that is maybe reminiscent of something we'll see later, with people sneaking into King's Landing and taking the crown. Something like that might happen. What do you guys see any sort of potential parallel there for this sneaking in commoner's gear and coming out as a king? Does that strike any chords?
I could see it happen with Aegon. I don't know. I think that's the next best, chance we have for it is Aegon going in to take the throne. But I feel like when he sits it, he's going to sit it.
Yeah,
he might just going anywhere.
He might just come marching in and triumph. Yeah, I don't know about sneaking in. Yeah, I'm not sure that.
But it will have that kind of quality they talk about in the Dance of the Dragons and in Princess and the Queen. How he had, the Aegon the Conqueror's sword, Aegon the Conqueror's crown, all the things that made him Aegon the Conqueror. So I'm sure he'll have that. He'll have Blackfire. He'll have a crown. Right. All the good stuff.
Yeah, all the regalia will be.
Yeah, all the symbols.
Everything but the blood.
That's right.
Right.
Slay that lie, Danny.
What was important there. So yeah.
So so we have this. He sneaks in. They grab their dragons, and then the banners are called. Maegor emerges from the south, and they have this conflict at the God's Eye. Now, of course, it had to be at the God's Eye, didn't it? We have to have a big black dragon, a couple of dragon battles at the God's Eye. Now we have a few dragon battles at the God's Eye now. So that's clearly important, right? That's clearly foreshadowing. I think maybe Daemon and Aemon is more on the nose foreshadowing for what we might be able to see later. But this is important too. Especially if it's a big black dragon killing a claimant who doesn't have, as by force, Maegor being Dany in this case. Not that Dany is like Maegor that much, but she is going to be flying a black dragon. So do you guys think young Griff gets a dragon at all, or is that more of a Euron thing, or in general, what do you think with regards to that?
It's hard to see how that would work out. I mean, with only 2 known dragons available and a lot of people that those could be those could go to. If he did, then we'd have to accept that Dany would, like in a situation like this, that Dany could potentially be in the position of having to kill one of her own dragons, which would be
and maybe looking like a kinslayer, things like that. So
I think him not having dragons will probably be the thing that actually does him in the end. I feel like that's the one thing he won't have, and that's the only thing Dany actually gets, right? Is she gets her dragons, and that's the only big, claim against him that she does get. And I think he'll probably die in the end, more than likely, indirectly or directly from the dragons.
I think so too. I'm a fan of him dying to wildfire. That theory, I lean towards that one, but
I do too.
I'm not married to it. What do you think, Lady Gwyn? Do you have a prediction for young Griff's death? Are you on Team Wildfire?
Yeah, probably. If I had to pick, like you said, I'm not married to it. I think there's some other valid thoughts, but it seems like a pretty reasonable one given all the themes.
Cool. Yeah. We have a couple of super chats here. One from Stannis Baratheon, who wants to know where is baby Maegor, who he says might be Varys' ancestor. That is a mystery that we never really got enough information to solve. He apparently died young, but we don't really know how or why, if there was any foul play or if it's just being a baby in a medieval setting. It's hard. It could be just that. But yeah, we don't know. It's interesting to see someone named Maegor, obviously, and we have another Maegor in this story, Maegor Towers, who befriends Rhaena at the end of her life, which is a nice little anecdote, but probably not relevant to Song of Ice and Fire, but fun. Also a super chat from Bubba Husky, who says, for having Dayne fans on tonight, thanks.
Yeah, rock and roll, House Dayne, best house. Sparks and Danes, that's it. That's all I need.
Cool. So let's have our first of two parallel lives of the day. The first one is going to be a character we're going to talk about really shortly, Septon Moon. We're basically in that line of he's in our sights for the timeline here. Septon Moon, to me, has a lot in common with Robert Baratheon. He has a couple of very strong, obvious parallels, being a loud, large man who loves drinking and sleeps with lots of women. He has lots of bastards. He has a really unreasonably strong hatred of the Targaryens, which of course Robert had. He just the mention of them makes him angry. He thinks they should all be shoved into, killed, or pushed back into the sea. And then we have, so all those things sound a lot like Robert, don't they? We have the bastards, we have hating the Targaryens, we have the size, we have the being loud and boisterous and charismatic, despite all that. So that's pretty strong. Yet the difference here isn't in his death, is that it's a lot like Renly. We have Renly's death here, which is that he's killed in his tent in the middle of, in the midst of his men, with a lot of mystery surrounding it. His throat is slashed open, but there's also poison, which is kind of weird, isn't it? Why is there both? So let's go ahead and delve into that, actually, since we're talking about it. I was gonna hold it till later, but we're getting into it now. Let's just do this now. So, Lady Gwyn, I know you wrote some stuff in our document here ahead of time, I think, if I remember correctly, about about some of these same questions, like why was there two methods of killing him, and why? Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's up with that? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking for my notes.
Where did they go?
Where did they go? Okay, so Yoko and I talked about this yesterday. We kind of talked it out, and we think, so you get these two women, not two women, one woman, but two sort of murder weapons. It's like a Murder on the Orient Express kind of moment. You got two separate would-be killers. Why wouldn't this woman just leave the tent quietly after sharing that poisoned wine with Septon Moon? I mean, she had him. They drank half the flagon of wine. She could have just had him finish it, theoretically, or maybe not even. The rest of it was enough to kill four guardsmen the next day. She could have just left quietly. So I don't think she's, I think we're left to think that she's not the one that cut his throat. We're told poison is a woman's weapon. So, that's that. There's so much similarity, though, to the Renly situation. we can't forget that in that case, that woman is not the woman that was in the tent with him is not the one that did the killing. Yolkboy suggests that the cat's paw, the woman, was probably working for the Hightowers. That was his feeling. He felt like, where did she go to? She vanished from the encampment, the walled city right there. So if she went into the safety of the city, that seemed like a kind of a reasonable thing. You get ideas like she had a glamour on or something like that too.
Yeah.
But basically our verdict was murder by person or persons unknown.
And you mentioned, did you mention Murder on the Orient Express in our notes? That's I haven't seen that movie, but is that kind of, I guess the point is that there was maybe two people trying to kill someone at the same time, and that confounds the whole thing because so
spoiler alert.
It's okay to spoil movies that are like 30, 40 years old.
Movies or more. I don't even based on an Agatha Christie novel from even probably 75 years ago.
Oh wow.
Bunch of people killed the person. Everybody went in and stabbed him, and you don't know who really did it. That's the I think we're just left to maybe not know who really did it.
So this Chloe, what do you think about this whole murder business? This whole salacious affair.
I mean, he really made himself a target. Obviously, I mean, he rose up, and I mean, when the small folk rise up, the world is big, but little people turn it around. So in their own eyes, when small folk and the religious people in his following rose up, he was very dangerous with the things he got them, going for. I mean, we see it echoed again, same kind of idea with the people that rise up in King's Landing and kill the dragons in the dance. He had a lot of people gunning for him. They were like, this guy's got to go. We got to take out the head. So I do love that idea of the Hightower cat's paw, especially since they have been, just itching for power, obviously, since the power vacuum began when Aegon landed. So it would make a lot of sense.
Yes.
Would solve their problem of not wanting to take up arms against the Rowans and the Elkharts, and kind of, what do we do? The Targaryens want to get rid of this guy. We can't fight our fellow lords over it, though.
Yeah, those are good tags. I like that theory a lot. I think it makes the Hightowers make the most sense. And I think they're probably the ones who killed that High Septon too. So them taking out key figures to stop, to halt large problems from happening. If you can just take one guy out and end a war, then you just got to be honest about it. Not be like Tywin, where you say, is it more honest to kill 10 men at dinner and then actually kill 10,000 men at dinner and act like you only killed 10 men at dinner? Yeah.
It's a couple of people.
Super chat from Chicxulub Rob. Happy New Year to my fellow Westorians. Catch the stream tomorrow. Thanks, Rob. Yes, as if you can't catch the streams, or if you can only catch part of it, they're always up on podcast form usually within 24 to 36 hours after the completion of the live stream. So staying on the topic of mysterious deaths, I wanted you guys to weigh in on Maegor's death as well, just what you think may have happened. Since we're talking about mysterious deaths, it seems like a good time to pivot over to that. Now, Septon Moon's death actually happens well after Maegor's death. I want to be clear on that. But this is a nice little subtopic of mysterious deaths around this time, whether it's Septon Moon, whether it's Maegor himself, whether it's the High Septon right before Maegor and Visenya arrive, whether it's, there's lots of possibilities here. So, first of all, Ashea's got the cool art of Maegor's death, going to be put on screen here. And one theory I hadn't considered, and that we didn't talk about last time, which I'll throw out to you guys to consider as well as whatever other takes you have, is that it could be Faceless Manish, right? Because it's so mysterious. Anytime a death is so mysterious and so who did it, and you really don't have a good answer, that might mean that it was the Faceless Man, because they're so good at exactly that. So I think, Jen, you had some particularly interesting notes that I saw in here. So we'll start with you.
Yes. Seeing as how you mentioned this, Fire and Blood suggests person or persons unknown. There's that phrase again, via a hidden passage. And then later on, they suggest that maybe Rhaena was responsible. Then I was rereading over the last few days, and I noticed that they mention about Rhaena that Dreamfire is noted to have already produced 2 clutches of eggs. So I thought, Well, that's interesting. That means Rhaena's got a bunch of eggs, potentially, because she's had Dreamfire, and, who knows when those eggs were produced. Are these Chekhov's eggs? We know Euron, Balon. We know what the price of a king's death is, apparently, from the Faceless Men. So could the Faceless Men, or someone similar, have been hired to do this deed for Rhaena? Obviously Fire and Blood says, well, she was long gone. I don't know how she could have possibly done that. But rumor has it that she was responsible. So she hired someone with using one of her dragon's eggs.
So motive is there for sure for Rhaena. No question. The opportunity is, well, that's the Faceless Men to figure that part out. And the money, like you said, the egg and all that, even the same form of payment we've seen before. That's a good theory. I really like it. Chloe, what do you think?
I feel like this book especially really got me in the mood to realize, wow, there are dragon eggs that we didn't really think about, that we didn't know about. I think George really got that across, that there were a bunch of clutches of eggs that just might be around. And I mean, eggs are power. Dragons are magic made might. They're, fire turned flesh. They're kind of a big deal. They could turn a lot of different things. So them used as currency then was big. And the Eastern influence that we see across this book, whether it's the Pentoshi at court, the Lyseni, the Tyroshi, I mean, there's a lot of different influences. We don't see that as much now, obviously, with the throne in modern day. Not a lot of outside foreign influences and diplomacy going on back and forth. So I don't think it's out of the question for it to have been a Faceless Man at all. I think the Valyrians kind of, as we know, got to play God, especially in these early days. They really God modded everything. I mean, they had dragons. It's really hard to say no to dragons. Really hard. Hard.
One thing that just struck me during this conversation is that, and it is even referenced later in the book, maybe not intentionally, but the idea of the old fable, the fairy tale of the goose that laid the golden eggs. I mean, that's literally what we have here, right? We have dragons laying eggs that are insanely valuable, even if they're fossilized. And then later we actually have the humorous anecdote that Mushroom tells us that Aegon II actually sat on an egg to try to hatch it, which is like a chicken, right? So
Humpty Dumpty did have a great fall.
Yeah. He did. He did. A great fall from Sunfire from about 20 or 30 feet above the ground, breaking both his legs. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Bela.
This is my favorite. That's my girl.
Yeah. So also shout out to Grant Dickerson, longtime supporter and friend of the community. He's been working on a project for helping to alternate ways to search through the database of A Song of Ice and Fire materials. That's something he's been working on for a long time. He also suggested a parallel to Septon Moon, a real-world parallel, which is son Kim Moon, the cult leader. And I didn't have time to do the research because he sent me this message earlier today. But he's got the same name, and he was a cult leader that had all these women. And so on the surface, that sounds real similar. So I encourage you all to look that up on your own. I'm going to do the same. And that should be fun. Okay. So that as far as that goes with Maegor, I really like Lady Gwyn's idea there that could be a connection between the egg thing. So let's see. Let's move onward to what's next. We have the fall of Maegor. We talked about enough, I think, but there's a couple of little things I wanted to throw out there. One of them will be the idea that Visenya not liking Tiana, which we mentioned before. Do you think there's any chance that Tiana took out Visenya, like she killed her? Visenya was old enough to have died on her own. There's no need to theorize this. But considering just how disastrous her death was for Maegor, and just how much he just couldn't handle it, how badly things went for him, how his reign fell apart. I don't know. It's just worth considering, even if I don't know that we can really get any answers out of it.
I think worth considering. I mean, look, they're these two mighty, powerful women, obviously in some sort of conflict or, contest for Maegor's affections or attention or power over him or what have you. So,
and if he was trying to kill all his other wives, then it would make sense to take Visenya out too, just to be like the one person that's controlling him, So that would fit in with her what she was maybe doing there. What do you think, Chloe?
I think the only problem there is that once you get rid of Visenya, and then you have obviously of Rhaena out, biding her time, and then you have Maegor. And as we learned, Tiana obviously didn't really like Maegor enough to let him have heirs or a happy life. So, so I don't know exactly if maybe she would have taken Visenya out, because once you lose Visenya, that grip that Tiana has of power probably gets a little looser. I think that the only problem here is that, like, meta level, we'll never learn if it was or not. This was kind of our last ditch effort to learn that, I think. There's a lot of the mysteries left in Fire and Blood suck, because part 1, you're like, oh, well, more than likely, could maybe learn in a later volume, but probably not. Yeah. Probably never going to learn anything more. So Visenya may have just died.
Yeah, it seems likely enough. Yeah, I mean, and if Tiana wanted to kill Visenya, maybe she could have done it sooner. I don't know. Yeah, but if she did it, I guess it was sneaky, because there's nothing in the book that suggests it was foul play. So yeah, that might be a bit of a reach. Anyway, let's move on. Viserys, poor second son, third born of Rhaena, I believe third born. Alysanne was last. Aegon was second. Rhaena was first. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, and so. That was hard. At first I thought maybe he wasn't, maybe that was intentional. Maybe he was becoming a bit too much like Maegor, but no. We're told that he was popular. He was a nice kid. Everybody liked him. I guess they just couldn't do anything. I guess they just couldn't bring him. So that must have been really hard. Rhaena had to abandon her son, knowing that Maegor would probably do something like that. She probably hoped it wasn't 9 days of torture, but she had to know that was a possibility. So that really colors Rhaena's anger later, and it's a wonderful suggestion for her motive to have killed Maegor via assassination. So now we have the succession part. This is the part I think is particularly important, and it comes with some important details that are also potentially foreshadowing. For example, the triple marriage is interesting. I don't know if there's going to be any sort of triple marriage in the Song of Ice and Fire. I guess there could be. I don't think so, but there could be. You guys say so if you think there will be. But more importantly, I think, is the notion of a female heir, the succession crisis, and then this baby swap. So the baby swap, that, of course, has a lot of relevance. So you guys should weigh in here. Chloe, you go first this time. What do you think about the baby swap?
I found it really, really interesting that George, put a baby swap in here in general. It makes me wonder in the current modern text what baby swap we will see if Aegon, that whole baby swatch, her fluffle will get switched up. It was, so they were 6, right? It was 6 when she baby swapped them. And it's interesting because their personalities, you can tell before you even get the confirmation of the baby swap being 100% done, their personalities change in the story. So I really like how that was done. I really want to see what comes in the main text, if it's going to be, Aegon being switched and it's a Blackfire, or Aegon being switched and it's with some other kid, or what happened there.
Good call. Lady Gwyn, what do you think?
Well, I think that it's interesting that he introduces this idea of a baby swap, and we talk about that so much in the fandom, and he puts it there for a reason. I mean, we're looking at Dunk and Egg, just to reach out for a second. And one of the things I pointed out in our analysis is that he talks Dunk and Egg. The first story is technically, a Targaryen in hiding. So that's a theme that we kind of do to death until it's done in the fandom. But those things really exist. So I think the baby swap, it's there for a reason to bring our attention to that. And we've got all kinds of, the obvious one is the Aegon, Baegon, whatever kind of convoluted swap that turns out to have been.
You two both, other ones. Yeah, you two both wrote some other potential parallels, some that have already happened as well. It's harder maybe to guess which ones will happen, but I see some in our notes here. Go ahead and why don't y'all throw some of those out there? I think some of these are pretty cool.
Yeah. Go ahead, you do yours.
Eliana in chat, my love of my life, Eliana from Girls Gone Canon, did just throw out there too. Of course, Aemon and Monster were just switched in the main text. That's an obvious one as well.
That's a huge one. Yeah, right. Very good. Yeah. Should have thought of that right away.
We see Viserys 2 do it as well on the Gay Abandon, which great boat name. I love that. Viserys 2 was on the Gay Abandon.
And of course, Varys is claiming to have, not switched to babies, but probably did. That's the most straightforward one, probably.
Right.
And then Lady Gwyn, you had another one, I believe, right?
Yeah, I've always felt that the Ashara Dayne's stillborn daughter that Barristan talks about, very likely could actually have been a born daughter who turns into Illyria Dayne, allegedly Ashara's younger sister. That sort of thing happens in families. It happened in noble families. It happens I know a family it happened in real life in the 20th century. Unwed mother has a baby and passes it off as her younger sister. So even if Ashara is still in hiding elsewhere,
with 2 other kids, with other children. Who said that?
That first one, obviously, I think on the timeline would have had to precede that. So I'm voting for Illyria there.
I told y'all she's the biggest fan of Ashara.
The only way Illyria would happen is if Ned and Ashara did happen, and that's a whole nother podcast. So we're not even gonna.
Yeah, we'll save that for some other time.
Does line up, just saying.
Were you disappointed that there were not, or were you maybe kind of expecting there not to be much Dayne action in this book?
There wasn't a lot, but we did get a little bit with Clarice.
Clarice? I think it was Clarice.
Clarice?
Yeah.
I'm close. It's Clarice. Something. Okay, it's a C name. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And it was going to be the marriage to Maegor, so that's kind of perfect there.
Absolutely. I got really excited. I think when I first opened the book, I'm pretty sure I tweeted out Dayne first mentioned this page. I want to say it was at Joe Magician. I think I was yelling at him about it, but yeah, there was still some good Dayne stuff. I just told myself going in, there's not going to be anything because I don't want to be disappointed. So
good policy. Very good policy.
Yes.
So let's see. What do we have next? We have Tiana's confession is interesting. Maybe the confession is a little less interesting than the implications of it. First of all, the reason she confessed, I think, is pretty straightforward. It's the same reason we have that sergeant who's about to be burned to death in Stannis' army insults everybody so that they kill him before he's burned to death. So he doesn't have to. So he gets the lesser of two evils. Having your throat slashed is preferable to burning to death. So I think that's what Tiana was doing here. However, it's not necessarily. That doesn't make it a false confession necessarily. So she avoided being tortured by admitting it. Maegor just killed her outright. But this creates an interesting conundrum. She predicted Eleanor Costain's babe would have the same issues as his other babes. So that gives her a lot of credibility as to her poison claim being real. However, we already have these other cases of Targaryen babies coming out like dragonish, lizardy, reptilian babies. Does this poison sort of trigger that in the womb, or does this kind of undermine some of the magical blood argument? What do you guys think? I think this is George kind of threw a monkey wrench at us, I think, with this one. Let's see, Chloe, looks like you had a lot of notes on this one. You go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really confirming the malformed baby, obviously. There's also the idea, obviously when it comes to all these 3 different brides with these babies, this is an exact telegraph of Jane Westerling and abortifacients, and killing off the baby. That was really interesting that he straight up was just like, let's just choose another Jane Westerling and have her have some monsters.
Yeah, exact same name.
Little on the uterus there, George. But I'm like, we get it. We understand. But it's interesting with all of if she poisoned the other wives, they all had these malformed babies. It's not only giving us, I don't know, even like a whisper of a look into Tiana's motivations, because we don't really get her motivations. And there could be 3 to 5 different ones, She slept with both Alice, we're told, as a rumor of she was a paramour of Alice Haraway and Maegor. And then, she got jealous and killed them off, or she hated Maegor, and I know Lady Gwyn has a lot of thoughts on this too. There's so many different things, and we aren't going to get that narrowing down. So that's frustrating.
Yeah. We may get some other parallel situation that is so familiar that the answer given in that one feels like the answer for this one, but that will still not ever, that won't be proof, but it'll be something. Yeah, it looks like Lady Gwyn, you got a lot of notes on this too, so go for it.
My notes, I mean, it really amounts to a lot of questions because we can't really find answers, but it strikes me as a cautionary tale about torture. The idea that starting with the Alice Haraway situation, you can get anyone to confess to anything by torture. Like, let's look at the Blue Bard and what's happening with Cersei and Marjorie in the main story. Same sort of thing. So Tiana sets up. I'm wondering. This is me, sort of. She sets up this whole Alice Haraway affair to gets a few dozen confessions through torture that are probably spurious. But what were her motivations? Was she doing it because Maegor asked her to? Was she trying to please him or help him, save face, whatever? Did she actually poison? I tend to think that the babies were the babies. They're dragon babies. They're these malformed dragon babies. Whether she did something to bring on these miscarriages, or if she simply maybe took advantage of it in a very strange way and first used it for Maegor's benefit, weirdly, and then used it against him, and then finally to her own purpose so that she could, get that that death that she wanted instead of being tortured to death the way Alice Haraway was. My guess is she never saw that coming.
Probably not. That certainly wasn't her end game, and that's like you say. That is, but on the other hand, what was her end game? It's very difficult to understand, like what her ambition was here. And one thing I like about, in particular, I think is a really good point you make there too, is that looking at it the opposite way. Here's Tiana, Mistress of Whispers. So if anyone else is doing this poisoning, she could have revealed it. So she, more than anyone, knows that if she's not doing the poisoning, then no one is. So your point being that maybe she just made that up because she knew it would happen. Because, hey, it happened all these other times. It's not a tough prediction to make. Maegor's had this many abomination babies. Is it really a prediction? Like, oh, did she really see the future? Or did she know because she poisoned them herself? Well, maybe, but if it happens 3 times, then she's just, it's going to be the 4th one's going to look the same. Like, that's not really going out on a limb.
And maybe she knew something that's not in, now we're going sort of like extra text, but could she have known something from these kind of lowborn women that he may have, had affairs with? There could be other little dragon babies that she knew about, so she may have had more evidence. Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever know.
Yeah, I don't think we will either.
No, definitely not. It's like if you take Melisandre, like a pinch of Melisandre, and shake it over Mirri Maz-Dur and then put her in King's Landing as the Mistress of Whispers. I think there's a lot of that. And it does set the stage for Daenerys' first baby, when she has her stillborn and it's monstrous and scaly, etc. It sets the stage for that similar genetics thing going on.
Yeah, there wasn't any poison in there. There was interference, but there wasn't poison. You could maybe say, in a sense, it was poison, but not literally. So it kind of works as a literary parallel, and a lot of the details line up too. So yeah, it's really interesting. I think George is really doing that kind of thing he does sometimes, where he gives us an answer, but he clouds it a little bit. He doesn't. It's not totally clear either. He gives us more possibilities, so we can't be fully settled.
Yep.
One little footnote to this whole saga with Maegor and all his kids is there's a kind of a throwaway line much later that comes when Jaehaerys finally starts letting all these people out of prison that Maegor had thrown down in there. And they were part of the reason they had to stay down there so long was because Jaehaerys couldn't free them during his before he was come of age, because his decrees didn't have meaning yet, and the Maester was running things for part of the time. So it got put on hold, which was bad for some of the people stuck down there. But the mention is of these, quote, lowborn trolls named as Maegor's whores. So apparently he had like a squad of women in addition to all his wives, and he didn't have kids with these women either. But there's no mention of like these abomination kids. So I have two ideas here. One is that it's a little bit like Aerys, where you have a really aggressive master of whisperers keeping an eye on everything. And because it's always been kind of suspicious that Aerys never had any, confirmed bastards, despite sleeping around relentlessly, right? Yeah. No bastards that we know of anywhere. And that's kind of weird. So maybe Varys was doing something, like making sure none of those, dalliances
here, a little tansy there.
Yeah, so maybe Tiana was doing the same here, something like that. Because you contrast that to like Aegon the Fourth, who was just like, boom, kid, boom, kid, boom, kid, just everywhere. And then we have this where there's just nothing. So, very, very interesting. We do have one claim later, much later, of a descendant of Maegor the Cruel named Silver Denys. But that apparently is, no one takes that seriously. And then he gets eaten by Sheep Stealer, I think. So
Sheep Stealer. I just looked it up.
There he goes. So that's that for Silver Denys.
The king who never was.
Dennis the Menace.
My silver prince.
Never ever been a prince so beautiful.
Connington was born in the wrong era. Okay, let's do a little mid-roll action here real quick, then we'll get back into it. We'll go to early Jaehaerys' minority and go from there. So, it is time to give a shout out to our Blood Riders. That is Vorsaki, wielder of a Valyrian steel arak with a dragonbone hilt, and Koholkoi, called Sunpiercer, wielder of a dragonbone bow, and Kokavo, the Tamer, wielder of the wildfire whip Gehenna. Now, those names are pretty hard to say. We also have our Northern champions who get shout-outs periodically. That would be... they're kind of hard to find. Here they are. Northern champions. We have Jay Wilson, Winter's King, Sir Stephen, the Hammer of the North. We have Winter's King, Lord of the First Men. We have Lady Ardros, Mother of Wolves. We have Sir Brian the Returned, Knight of the Last House, wielder of the Valyrian steel blade Red Song. We have Sir Kobe of House Stonesmith, words are wind, deeds are stone. We have Lady Cat Jones of the Big Pond, wielder of the Valyrian steel blade Ginger's Honor. We have Jake Snow, a.k.a. Jacob Ice Eyes, the bastard of the Last River. Lord Darren of House Rambler, the last hunt is ceaseless. And Lady Bobby of House Mitchell. Roughly half of the names are come up with by the patrons themselves, by our fellow Westorians, and about the other half are made up by me. So if you wanted to sign up and get a name, you don't have to come up with it. I can do that for you. So you have options. All right. The only other announcement I have here for the midday stream here, actually I have two other announcements. One is I'm going to issue a big happy name day to Hema Helminth, a.k.a. Thomas Pappas, who is one of our mods and very generous supporter of the show all around and in the fandom all around. So happy name day to you. And if you want to ingest more of Fire and Blood, but don't have time to sit down and read all the time, I highly recommend Audible. The new reader is Simon Vance. So there's unfortunately, or fortunately, if you weren't a fan of Roy Dotrice, there is a different reader now. He's very solid, very good reader. And I'm very happy with, I think I've listened to it all the way through 4 times now. And so it just flows. It's just fun. So definitely, if you're so inclined to take it in through Audible, you can go to historyofwesteros.com and sign up through our link, and you get 2 free downloads. And you don't even have to keep the subscription and you can end up keeping those 2 downloads even if you don't keep the subscription. So it's a very good deal, very good opportunity. You may find that you really like audiobooks that way. Hey, if you like podcasts, you're halfway there. All right. That's that. Let's move on. Let's talk about Jaehaerys' minority. He became king pretty late. Not pretty late, but not too long before he was 16. I guess it was about a year and a half. Not a full 2 years even. So, but a lot happened in that year and a half. In fact, this is a bit of a recurring theme in Fire and Blood is regencies. Like, we have several regencies, and they're very important. And I'm curious what that's going to mean in a Dance with Dragons, or not Dance with Dragons. Sorry, Twins of Winter, because obviously there's not going to be a regency for Jon or Dany, probably. Although Dany is. How old is Dany? Is she 16? She's not 16, is she?
I Yeah, she would be. Yeah, she would be.
Okay, so if she's not, she will be by the time
she will be like in a minute.
She's close. Aegon is like Tyrion thinks he's 16 to 18, so he's of age. But of course, Tommen has a regency right now. That's the one that we're dealing with, and there aren't really succession questions with him as long as he's alive in terms of non-violent questions. But this is still should tell us a good bit about what's coming. So let's talk first about succession questions, because of course, what we're going to have is this triumvirate of claims potentially, where we have Dany coming in with the kind of like Aegon the Conqueror and having a really strong claim. Then we have young Griff with a stronger claim, quote unquote, but probably fake. And then we have Jon, whose claim, if we were to use TV as a guide, potentially is stronger than Dany's. But if TV is just doing their own thing, we just don't know. So let's just call that a bit of an unknown. It's kind of up in the air. So either way, Jon's going to figure into this whole discussion one way or the other. That's what really matters. So let's get into this, starting off with who should have been, how people saw it and who should have been based on argument. We'll start with, looks like Lady Gwyn, you've got some good notes here on Maegor's heir, Arya, and Rhaena herself. So, fire away.
Yeah, so this is the sort of thing that'll just make your head hurt, I think. There's so many strands of it. But arguably, Arya was named Maegor's heir, so she should have been the queen when he died. But she's a 6-year-old girl, right? So then you get Rhaena, the eldest child of Aenys. So just as arguably, she's got a superior claim to anyone, certainly above her daughter, arguably. Her own birth had raised the question of whether the succession would go Aenys to Maegor or Aenys Rhaena Maegor. And I think there was it's left sort of vague what the decision was. Maybe they never actually said that there had been a decision because Aegon was born a year later, so that they were able to kind of sidestep it. But look, she doesn't want to press a claim. She doesn't even like King's Landing. She has no desire to have anything to do with this. So once again, it appears to be settled by Rogar Baratheon, who says, this is not Dorne, and Rhaena is not Nymeria. But really, they're able to sidestep the whole issue because she chooses to just stay out of it. So it allows them to set a kind of precedent of sorts, even though it was kind of a non-issue in this case. I find it interesting that the ultimate solution is to keep Arya as Jaehaerys' heir. Very interesting, because she's the daughter of an uncrowned king over the daughters of 2 previous kings, meaning Jaehaerys' own sisters, Rhaena, his older sister, and Alysanne, his partner, but who arguably could have been his heir. I mean, so it's just an interesting choice, I think, and I think it's one of expediency, since they obviously expect Jaehaerys to have kids.
Yeah, you wonder if, Jon somehow becomes king and names Dany his heir or something weird like that. I don't know. That seems maybe a little over the top, but I guess, I don't see young Griff naming Dany as his heir. That seems...
No, it's an odd thing when brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles are marrying each other, because just is your wife
sure is.
Or your heir because she's actually your closest living relative, or it's weird, and they have some weird precedents that they set.
Yeah, you wonder too. Also about this, it's interesting because, of course, the Rogar is sort of painted as like a bad guy here, and in a lot of ways he kind of is, but in a lot of ways he's not. And at the time, we have to remember that at the time he didn't want Jaehaerys and Alysanne to marry, of course, because and he had a good reason. I think if we're being fair, it's his methods to try and stop the marriage that are problematic, very problematic. But the idea that they shouldn't get married in the first place was shared by Jaehaerys and Alysanne's mother, as well as Rhaena. As a lot of people were like, yeah, this is not a great idea because of look, the Faith are still out there rampaging. It really is a big problem for the religion of this entire country. That you guys are about
to happened.
Yeah, exactly.
We did this.
so Rogar and Alyssa and all had a point, they definitely had a point, but they were wrong in the long run because for reasons they probably couldn't have foreseen. The reason this worked was purely the talent of Jaehaerys and Alysanne. Like, they made it work. They rose above this giant difficulty and just defeated it. And Rogar and Alyssa probably weren't wrong to think that was too much of a challenge for them, or for anyone. Rogar having the attitude he has, being like, I can do this. If he had turned his attitude towards, no, we can get them to accept this, maybe that would have been better. But anyway, Chloe, what do you think? You haven't weighed in a minute. Let's get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it totally sets a precedent, like Lady Gwyn was saying. We're talking about this on our Dance of the Dragons episodes we're doing on Patreon right now, and we've gotten pretty deep in. This is what pretty much this unclear succession and Rhaena, not actually having that birthright is pretty much what starts and makes the dance really happen. You get the same thing of, even with Jaehaerys, he says to Alysanne, well, our daughter's birthrights, eventually, he says, well, they can marry their brother, just like Aegon did with his sisters, and that's how they'll rule. So it's always been this unclear, murky thing. Even when Rhaenyra is clearly named the heir, goes through a ceremony. A lot of people see it. They swear some vows and stuff. And it's interesting that you get in the dance Aegon too saying, well, let her come to me, just like you get young Griff saying, oh, well, I'm not going to her. I'm just going to go for the throne first. So,
yeah, that makes sense. So here's another thing to think about. We have, as we see in the dance later, this is something that kind of comes back and forth until it's supposedly, I want to say, quote unquote, settled by the end of the dance. Because it doesn't come out, not that it's necessarily settled permanently, it just doesn't come up again. We don't have the issue of a female heir being passed over in any kind of large scale problem or any kind of, there's no succession crisis like that until maybe now in A Song of Ice and Fire. So Westeros sort of, that's why I'm saying it's sort of settled. It wasn't maybe permanently settled, but it's settled for a long time. But yeah, so there's like issues like gender and youth. They come up a lot. And the youth thing is really interesting because it's a bit of a thing for Tommen, especially because Tommen really is just a little boy. He's more of a little boy than even his age is, which is sad because that poor kid's going down. Possibly literally, like little Joffrey falling off a dragon. Yeah. So we have to joke about it to make ourselves at peace with it. Yeah. And it makes sense. Like you can kind of see why you wouldn't want to have a 6-year-old as king. Yeah, like that. Right. You could get that argument, but that's a problem with monarchy in the first place, really. Anyway, so that I don't think will matter a whole lot, the whole Regency period, but except for whatever else we get from Tommen's Regency period, which is still ongoing. Mm-hmm. So we have Alyssa named as regent. Now, Alyssa is a little maybe I just didn't look closely enough, but Alyssa feels a little under-repped in this book. She maybe is a little bit murky, a little bit hazy, but she does have some pretty big moments, even though she's kind of in between the lines a lot of the other times. So let's talk about Alyssa for a minute and how she handled being regent. Because I think there's some parallels to the modern series. Rhaena gives me some Cersei vibes, but Alyssa occasionally does too. But not to the degree that Cersei is, but similar circumstances in some ways. So let's talk about that for a minute. Chloe, your thoughts on this transfer of power issue with Alyssa and Jaehaerys, and potentially how this might play out in A Song of Ice and Fire vis-a-vis transfer of power, perhaps from Tommen's regime over to young Griff's regime, which we may see that happen.
I think especially with the Dornish coming to the capital, there might be a little more to explore there because, we're on the brink of civil war, right? You have Greens versus Blacks in King's Landing right now, soon to be True. Versus red and oranges as well, So there's a lot going on in King's Landing. People are going down, and it just so happens that if Tommen dies and the Tyrells get canceled out, who do you think the Dornish would support?
Yeah, well, good point. Good
Gold
point.
shall be their crown. I mean, it's something that I think is just so. You can already read the scenes right now of Cersei in the small council rolling her eyes about Nymeria being on the council and Tyene infiltrating the faith and just all this stuff that's about to just go, no pun intended, kaboom eventually in King's Landing. But there's something interesting with the way that the reign began that Jaehaerys, said, no, we're not going to execute. There won't be trials. It feels like something we might explore with Aegon the Sixth's reign. He's very kingly in his whole education. The way he chose Duck for his Kingsguard kind of makes me feel, I don't know, he's been raised, from his histories, his seven-pointed star, his courtesies, his sums. He's very masterful with the sword. With the Dornish being bloodthirsty, we might see that kind of change a few things for revenge, but I'm interested to see how he shows mercy to the lords that bend the knee, because his rule really could be great, even though built on a huge lie.
Right on. Well said. And I also, to add to that, I think that something that Jaehaerys did that I sort of expect Aegon to do, but I'm not sure, which is that he's going to try to be a good king. Like, he's going to try to be like a conciliator type, where he's going to not just execute a bunch of people for treason. He's going to try to pardon people and try to be the good, nice guy. Because that's what Varys has built him up to be, right? Varys is like, oh, he's going to be a good king. He's going to rule well and wisely. And he's going to tame the realm. He's going to tame the chaos and oversee peace. So here's a quote from Jaehaerys that I think we're going to see Aegon maybe do something like this, and it's not going to work, but I don't think, but he's going to try. There will be no trials and no executions. The realm must see that I am not my uncle. I shall not begin my reign by bathing in blood. Some came to my banners early, some late. Let the rest come now. And that could be like a thesis statement for his reign, I think. But this is happening during this transfer of power, when people are both being arrested or pardoned, or they are potentially, in some cases, they're asking for clemency. In some cases, they are, like Alyssa and Rhaena, in some cases, like really want to come down on certain people, like anyone who was around for the torture of Viserys, anyone who was around for the death of Aegon, who did nothing when Aegon rose, like that. A lot of bad blood still, but Jaehaerys is like, no. And that's a big deal that he got his way, because he's underage. He couldn't, like, they could have just, like, later when Aegon the Third does some of these things, they're just like, no, you don't count yet. Sorry. They listened, like Rogar on most things listened to Jaehaerys, and Alysanne too. So I think that's really, really neat. And good point also, Chloe, about the Dornish, that the attitude of theirs is different, and that this, especially this particular Dornish that we're dealing with right now, are not shy about taking some people out. So, yeah. So here's another couple of super chats. Good question here from Stannis Baratheon, as well as a question from McCall. So we'll do these here in order. First one is from McCall, Ink as Rain. She says, doesn't it happen with the children of the traitors that Rhaenyra has killed? They have firstborn daughters, but choose to name their younger brothers as heirs. Yeah, this is something that Corlys argues about. They have a dispute, one of many disputes, where it's almost like that stereotypical movie/TV show thing where you have a person looking at the camera, and it's even Game of Thrones season 1 does this, where Ned is staring at the camera and trying to decide whether to go to King's Landing or not, and you have Maester Luwin over one shoulder and Catelyn over the other shoulder, and Catelyn is being the good angel and Maester Luwin is being the bad angel. In the book, it's kind of reversed, but that's not important. So here it's kind of the same thing, where you have people giving this advice. Corlys is kind of usually the one giving good advice, and Daemon, the rogue prince, is over here, no, just have them executed, or no, don't pardon them. He's just like so violent, so bloody. He's like, it's all these lessons we learned from people who are pretty violent, like Tywin. Tywin's like, nah, when they bend the knee, accept it. That's a lesson he learned personally, because when he was a kid, the whole Reigns of Castamere business, clearly he hadn't learned that lesson at that point, but he learned it later. And this is the same thing we have here. We have people like Bloodraven who are like, no, punish all the traitors viciously. And then people like Baelor the Blessed, or again, Tywin, who are like, no, when they bend the knees, let them rise back. So this is kind of an interesting thing, because you have different kind of characters arguing the same point, yet they're sometimes they're characters that have nothing in common, yet they both agree on this point, and there's characters that have so much in common that don't agree on this point. And I don't know, I'm kind of fascinated by that. So what do you guys think about this episode with Corlys and Daemon and the naming of heirs in the post-dance era? I know this is kind of jumping ahead a bit, but it's still relevant to what we're talking about. Do you have any thoughts on that with regard to McCall's question?
I think it's a recurring theme that George gives us over and over and over again. It's even it's going to come up in a very small way in the case of Aegon the Unworthy. Aegon the Unlucky, number 5, because there were other heirs. You know, were they young? Were they a girl? Were they? God, we're not going there. But you know, the whole question of being able to pick and choose how you want the succession to go, and that I think is at the heart of everything that's happened and is going to happen. And it is actually, this gives me a chance to bring this up, that's the crux of that Wars of the Roses influence on the story, because that's really what that particular real life history is all about. And it's something that plays out in all dynasties. At some point, as they get bigger and spread out, it gets confusing and they have to make choices. No hard and fast rule really can define everything for all history.
Yeah, do they have the right to name an heir that supersedes what the law says? That's kind of what it comes down to. A lot of times they're like, no, the law says this, and it says no. You know, Viserys named Rhaenyra heir, and the king is above the law. But the king is dead, so does his word still carry weight? I mean, we saw Roberts didn't, but when there's people with swords around, things change.
Yeah.
So, somewhat related question here. We have from Stannis Baratheon, how do we compare Rogar, Tywin, and Corlys? I think there's definitely a lot of similarities, because in every single case, all 3 of these guys were near the top of the heap, serving as hand to the queen in Corlys' case, hand to the king in both Rogar and Tywin's case, and also Corlys, being part of the regency later. But we have this situation where all 3 of them tried to marry the king or queen. Corlys didn't have to push it; it just happened in his case. But Rogar and Tywin both really like, hey, marry my son, marry my daughter, get that in there. And they both took, Tywin was less underhanded than Rogar by far, which kind of is like, yeah, that's a little odd. But I think that, I don't know how I would compare them. I think there's a lot, they have very different personalities, but they all had similar kind of ambitions. But they went about achieving those goals a bit differently. I guess if we're being fair to Corlys, or being fair to the other 2, Corlys didn't have to do some of the things they did because he was already like their cousins. He's already like related to the Targaryens. I mean, so is Rogar, but that was a more distant kinship, and the Velaryons were, kind of established at that point. So yeah, what do you guys think? Rogar, Tywin, Corlys. Other thoughts on similarities between those guys?
Well, like you said, you covered, they have a lot of similar themes and things that they're dealing with. But Corlys is clearly the superior of the 3.
Absolutely.
I have no words for how much I don't like Tywin. So
yeah, and Rogar does a handful of things that don't make him much better. So I mean, and he's not awful as bad. Just besides the whole bachelor party thing. It's kind of messed up. Yeah. He's not a guy you want to bring home to your mom, let alone marry your mom, right? Like, you don't really, you're like, maybe you don't. I don't want the knowledge that you're banging my mom out. Like, you of all people, dude, you're supposed to be my bro of the king. And you're out there just pumping my mom. But it's very indicative of all of these hands reaching for power. We get it with the High Towers, trying to marrying Alysanne to Viserys. It's the display of power. Something interesting is out of Orys and out of Rogar, getting them both a Baratheon as a hand, when previously we saw Baratheons as kings. We saw Renly, we see Stannis, we see Robert, and Rogar as the hand is literally like taking Robert out of the story, but making him the hand for a milder king. So it's just a really interesting power dynamic that George played with there with that character. Tywin, obviously, I mean, we see him, same thing. looking just to get that power up and get the hook in so that he can put his family's ambitions and names on the line. But Corlys, in a way, especially with all the succession crisis, I mean, the Velaryons got screwed a pretty good handful of times out of the succession. And obviously, we see they risk it all at many times for House Targaryen and keep that familial alliance, and they keep coming in to help them. And they get completely, their whole entire, everything gets sacked. They lose the riches that they gain at one point. I mean, we don't hear about the Velaryons now for a reason. They're not, we have Orain, and that's not really much to write home about. So
it's interesting because he actually, if you think they're all hand during for a young king, so it's an interesting thing to consider what Ned might have been like had things gone a little bit differently. Had he stuck around with Joffrey, he would have been facing these same issues, problems. How would he have? Well, we see what he kind of thought he was going to do, but
somewhat in reverse, right? Because he's like, he didn't want his daughter to marry the king, whereas all these other hands did. Yeah, he's like, I don't actually want this.
So we see what he kind of would have done, and actually, so the failure of the policies of someone honorable like Ned, just interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so we have about 30 minutes left. I'm going to do another Parallel Lives, and then we're going to talk about the new Tower of Joy. I think we're going to skip the Golden Wedding for now. We'll come back to that another episode. Y'all had some good thoughts on that, but unfortunately, we're not going to have time for it. So we'll have to hit some of the higher points here. I know we really wanted to talk about this comparison. This is a huge one. I definitely wanted to get both of y'all's thoughts on this, so we definitely wanted to skip ahead to this so we don't miss it. So we'll start with the comparison, and then we'll get your all's takes on it. So starting with the big comparison of Sansa and Alysanne. Even their names have some things in common, especially if you consider Sansa's alter ego, Elaine. So Elaine plus Sansa equals Alysansa. On the surface, I'll start with some surface comparisons, and then you guys can do some of the more detailed nuance, and then we get into some of the serious foreshadowing comparisons. So Alysanne, poise, kindness, courtesy, cleverness. She's an advocate for people who are less powerful than herself. She and Sansa have the same eye color, which is notable because Alysanne is Targaryen and doesn't have purple eyes. She has blue eyes. Alysanne is associated with Florian and Jonquil. Well, especially Jonquil, but but also Florian. Obviously, Sansa is too. Then we have some other things like just their general attitude, just kind of the way they carry themselves, which I guess is, I've kind of already said that with poise. We'll have, okay, so let's let Lady Gwyn start off, or I'm sorry, Chloe, you start off here with some of your favorite comparisons here.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of writing on this before Fire and Blood came out, so I was really excited, especially the excerpt when it came out. That was a field day for me. I was just sitting on Twitter going back in all my tweets going, I'm doing great. I did something good, George. Thanks, man. He broke into my mind for this. I was excited because Sansa has so many Alysanne references and just little digs, especially when you consider there really aren't many good queens in Westeros history, right? I mean, we hear about Nymeria, who was a badass, a witch queen badass. We hear about, all these Rhaenyra, not really nice connotations with her reign, from what we hear. I don't know about you guys, but, didn't end so well. And Alysanne is really the biggest, best queen that we hear about that actually did things. I mean, some of the queens we hear about in Fire and Blood, great, but some of them, their personalities are still mother, not really much to go off of. But Alysanne, as we know, gave the Night's Watch, she forced the Starks to give the Night's Watch land, which was the gift. And Ned says, there's a memory that we read in the books that Ned says, I want to resettle the gift after, all this stuff is over. It's a dream for spring. So I'm pretty sure Sansa and Jon are completely going to resettle the new gift after the war is over with wildlings and with those that were, of course, leal during the fight. But something that's also really cool is George wrote Alysanne with Eleanor of Aquitaine in mind, especially Katharine Hepburn's portrayal of her in Lion is Winter. I thought that was a really cool detail about Alysanne, but especially with the tall, unbent by time, unbowed kind of appearance, even when she got older. Katharine Hepburn, her portrayal of Eleanor of Aquitaine, she was the most eligible bride in Europe of her time, skilled in sewing, dancing, singing, all that stuff. Her mother and brother die. It leaves her the heir presumptive. Louis VI gets a claim on her land when he becomes her guardian, and her first marriage gets set aside eventually. She marries her cousin and acted as regent for her second son during the Third Crusades. And she was the queen consort of two kingdoms, France and England, and the Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right. She also outlived most of her children, which was an interesting detail George copied over with Alysanne. So there's this line George says in an interview, of course, that she was his most trusted counselor and his right hand.
Nice. That was wonderful. What a great rundown. That's awesome. Before I move on to your thoughts, Lady Gwyn, three things. One, super chat from Quado Cox. Quado. I called him Quado because that's his nickname in our Crusader Kings 2 stream. So says, Happy New Year and long live the king. Thank you very much. In fact, we have fireworks going off in the background of our neighborhood. So these fireworks are for you guys, especially for Quado Cox here. But also, an additional parallel to Sansa and Alysanne is the notion of a female protector. Ashea is going to put up some awesome art by Sanrixian.
Yes.
Here we have...
That was not the art I was talking about.
Oh.
I was thinking the art of Alysanne where she looks...
Oh, obviously. Yeah, we'll get that one too. Okay, so Ashea had another one in mind too. I pulled that one up also. But we have this one from Sanrixian for now. And there is the parallel being that Alysanne has this badass female protector and Sansa has Brienne. So... that is right on. So that is really cool. I like that a lot. And so with that, and especially because Lady Gwyn, you are wearing a Sanrixian shirt, please give us your thoughts.
Hang on. We've just unplugged something. My thoughts really are pretty much right in line with you guys all said it very eloquently, everything already. I really do like this parallel of Sansa and Brienne and Alysanne and Jonquil Dark. And I think, Chloe, did you put in this note about maybe even having a, Sansa's going to be maybe at Winterfell where they have warm springs. So you could have that parallel of where, the attempt on her life, possible assassination attempt, and in the warm spring area. So I'm interested to see how that plays out, and everything else you guys covered it so well. There's just so much good meat there, and lots of room for speculation on where Sansa's arc is heading, given that we know Alysanne's entire
One thing
happy life.
When I made the comparison on Twitter, I said, notice how no one killed Alysanne during her life. She had kids and died of old age. That parallel
fulfilling life. I love that. So.
And that does reflect pretty well. I think Sansa is definitely on the list of most likely to survive the series. She's up there on the top. Maybe not number one, but she's pretty high on that list, I think. So that lines up really well.
Most likely to succeed if I was voting in the high school Westerosi yearbook.
Yeah.
I'd vote Sansa.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, most likely. I like how George gave since Sansa's the redhead in the Brienne-Sansa pairing, that Jonquil Dark gets to be the redhead in the Alysanne pairing. That's pretty cool. So Ashea had another piece of art picked out. This is from Fire and Blood specifically, and this is Alysanne holding court, and it really just kind of gives a Sansa vibe here. This image of her just taking the time to talk to people.
Font of mercy.
Yes, singing right along. Yes, that's cool. Mm-hmm. And then we have an incident though that might be foreshadowing. That is very worth discussing. One thing that happens to Alysanne is that she has an assassination attempt on her, and it happens at Maidenpool, the site of Florian and Jonquil's legend. That's really interesting. So, Chloe, you on your show, you've talked about some of the original. Sorry for the fireworks going on in the background. It is New Year's Day, guys, but what are we gonna do? Discussing, you said you're discussing on your show, Girls Gone Canon, how George originally planned to have Sansa get pregnant with Joff's kid. So that still could be in the offing, not Joff's kid, obviously, but a pregnancy. And then this assassination attempt on Alysanne happens while she's pregnant. So please discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that totally could be a parallel. I'm not sure where it could happen because, by the time Sansa gets her way back to Winterfell, I'm not sure if there's going to be a lot of time for her to be wet in bed and preggo and walking around those hot springs, but it could definitely happen. I could see it as a thing. I do think that assassination attempt is something that's really interesting because at the time in the story, she was also, her and Jaehaerys separately were given companions that were supposed to sway them away from each other and push them away from each other. And this was really the thing that, just 100% cemented it. Like, nope, life attempt, staying together forever, screw the faith.
Yes. Lady Gwyn, what do you think?
Yeah, no, this is something that I could just see Sansa in those hot springs at Winterfell and Brienne. I don't know. I have so many thoughts.
We've only had a month and a week or so to think about all this. It's like we've been going off of thoughts that we've had for years and years. We're building off of now. It's like, wait, we've only been thinking about this for a month. Come on. It doesn't come quite as smoothly.
There's a lot of we're building this off of a little one line in this book, and imagine how many lines and trains of thought there are to follow.
Okay, so let's move on a little bit here to, I think, with our remaining time, we should talk about the retcon, the family tree retcon, because I promised that before and still didn't get to it, and we're running out of time to even get to it this time. So unfortunately, that does mean the Shivers is getting pushed again. We have the Golden Wedding, which I think might be relevant because of. We might see a big wedding. We might see whoever young Griff ends up marrying. They could do some sort of big showy wedding, kind of for the same reason, because it was like a big hey, this is the end of the chaos. Here begins the peace. And so I could see young Griff's regime doing something like that. So that's why that might be really relevant. But yeah, we'll get to that another time. We'll talk about the war for the White Cloaks. We'll talk about the new Tower of Joy, which I was pretty excited to talk about, but unfortunately we are not. We only have. Well, not enough time is what we have. So let's talk about this this family tree retcon, which is really strong, really telling. And it's so telling that it might be fake because George definitely is learning how attentive this fandom is. It's funny how he didn't necessarily realize how attentive we were. And he's starting to get that. And I think that means he might start trying a little harder to fool us. He pointed out specifically that there are red herrings in this book. We have no idea what's a red herring and what isn't. Sometimes we know what one is, like in the Winds of Winter, in the Dance of Dragons, when Lord Borel talks about the literal fish story with regards to Jon Snow's birth. That's a red herring. There's actual fish. It's
Melanie red herring.
Oh yeah, and the Melanie red herring, right? Yeah,
right. Or Harold Herring,
herring. Yep.
The blue and red checkered herring.
So George does this, but we can't. Sometimes we know, but we can't always know. So anyway, let me lay this out, all the details, and then you guys weigh in with what you think this means. So the change was this: originally, the firstborn child of Jaehaerys and Alysanne was Aeryn, Aeryn. Of course, it's the Targaryen spelling of Aeryn. Instead of Daenerys. Now what we have now is a firstborn Aegon. We may have had the Aegon already, but that Aegon died as an infant, almost immediately. So what we have is this: we have firstborn Aegon, secondborn Daenerys, thirdborn Aemon from Jaehaerys and Alysanne. Now think about it this way: then Jaehaerys and Alysanne's time, Aegon is born, he's the heir, he dies, making it Dany. Then Aemon is born, who supersedes Dany. So now compared to the current situation we have in A Song of Ice and Fire, Thagon's claim comes before Dany. If the Slayer of Lies prophecy is fulfilled, then he dies and she becomes superior again, claim-wise, until Jon potentially supersedes her again. And if Jon's real name is Aemon, then man, is that on the nose. Like, boom, like super on the nose. Like, and the thing that's so big because George went out of his way to change what he'd already done. Usually a retcon is a last resort of an author who has made a continuity error. He screwed up. He or she has made a mistake and they're like, well, I got to fix this. So, but there was no mistake here. George just was like, I'm going to change this. And he changed it to something really stunning in terms of this whole claim succession situation. So I know, Jen, you have an exclamation point mark here because you're a fan of Jon as Aemon, whereas I'm kind of on the fence, Aegon or Aemon. I'm not sure. You're a big Aemon backer. So you go first here and tell us what you think about all this.
Okay, first of all, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's why he got rid of it.
He was just like, that's just not doing it for us.
Maybe I'm wrong that he did make an error after all. He had to
Where can I throw an E?
So just get that one out of here. So we got rid of Aaron, which is just as well. But this it's just, as you said, it's so stunningly on the nose. And as you know and mentioned, big fan of Jon's real name being Aemon. I know the show suggested otherwise, but the show is the show and the books are the books. So there's quite a bit of textual evidence indicating that it could very well be Aemon. Not the least of which is that the one that comes to my mind is that the tongue-in-cheek comment by Jon when he's... I think it must be
Rob,
in Clash
when they're yelling about...
there's a bunch of that stuff too. Yeah, I'm Aemon the Dragon Knight, he says, but then he thinks to himself, nor was he Aemon Targaryen.
Oh, yeah, that one. Nor was he Aemon Targaryen, or is he?
Yeah. Really? We find that to be this sort of... So I think we talked about that we talk it out in our Jon episode, and love it. I absolutely love it. And I would point out that Aegon, Jaehaerys and Alysanne's Aegon died as a baby, just like presumably Rhaegar's Aegon died as a baby. I wager, I don't really remember, but maybe around even the same age. So, yeah, so it's just so on the nose. I think this was a retcon that kind of knocked a lot of people's socks off.
Yeah,
for good reason.
Real quick before Chloe, you weigh in, I wanted to say we also had this discussion, Jen. We all talked about this name thing back when it was revealed on the TV show, and at the time it was like it's so confusing because I really could see it going either way. I mean, during the Dance of the Dragons, there's 2 Aegons, so like we already have that, and I was running the fence. This does for me absolutely push it a little back towards Aemon for me. I was leaning towards Aegon, but this now either evens it out or maybe even pushes it a little bit towards Aemon.
Given how, if I could just say, I want to bump in 1 second, because given how much George has kind of pushed back against some of the changes the show has made, in making that distinction, the show is the show and the books are the books, and he wants us to be really clear about that. I wonder if this is a kind of way of him being like, guys, maybe it's not all set in stone. You might want to keep your open minds here. So.
I like that. Okay, yeah, Chloe, now what do you think? Are you, first of all, tell us whether you're on Team Aemon, Team Aegon, or maybe you're on Team Jaehaerys. That's the other idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of support for Team Jaehaerys right now. There's a lot of support in chat, which I used to be very Team Jaehaerys. I don't know, man. It's so hard. I don't know if I believe it would be Aemon either. I like it because of, Nor's my name, Aemon the Dragon Knight, especially when he's like, I'm Aemon the Dragon Knight. That little blip in his memory. I love that memory. It's very bittersweet and like sad to like him trying to emulate the hero when it's like, Jon, you are the hero, buddy. FYI. You'll find it out at the end, hopefully. But I would be fine with Aemon, but part of me really thinks, especially with the whole 7 Aegons, 7 kingdoms, if it is Aegon, that has to be a book twist, and it has to be really, well explained. Like I want some reasons. I want George to write me a handwritten letter explaining it to me. Here's the math. Here's the exact reason why. This is the time. It was 283, the third month, and this happened. Like, I want it all. Okay, so just saying that if it is Aegon, I will very reluctantly be okay with it if there's information attached. Very reluctantly.
Hey, John. that was part of the theory. Like in '96, people were like, "Hey, John, that works, right?" You know, that theory is really old, but it's kind of like the pink letter. Like I lean pretty strongly towards it being not a mystery, right? That it was written by Ramsay, but you can't really. There's no like, no, it can't possibly have been Mance. There's nothing that says. Mance is a valid theory, in my opinion. It's the same here. Like Aegon and Aemon, like these both have plenty to support them. The Aegon stuff is maybe more recent, but the Aemon stuff is like early foreshadowing. Game of Thrones book, like early chapters, like he's talking about Aemon. So, man, good mystery, George. You got us. All right. So the aspect of this that we don't have time to discuss is the Targaryen disease immunity or lack thereof, or the possibility that the shivers is magical, which would be why they couldn't resist it. And we're going to discuss that alongside the winter fever, which talk about a name that yells ice and fire, winter fever. So, and both of those diseases come during winters that are almost a century apart. And we all know there's going to be some disease during this coming winter of A Song of Ice and Fire, if not just grayscale, maybe other stuff. So that's really important. But alas, we are out of time, so we'll come back with all the things we didn't talk about this time, plus several more. Any new questions you have in the meantime, send them to us at westeroshistory@gmail.com or westeroshistory@gmail.com or at westeroshistory on Twitter, or join the Facebook group, ask questions there, or just ask them in the chat next time. So I want to say thanks very, very much to my guests. We'll go through, both of y'all will have you tell us where to find you out on the interwebs, and please repeat what you have coming up next. We started with Lady Gwyn at the beginning, so we'll start with Chloe here as we do our outro.
Good. Let me just Daenerys this one. Here's the titles, right? The layers of titles. Girls Gone Canon. You can find us on pretty much any of the providers for podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. We're on Twitter at Girls Gone Canon. 2 N's, not 2 N's in the second part. You'll figure it out. It'll be somewhere. There'll be a link. You can find my work. I have a blog. It is www.liesandarborgold.com. And you can also find my stuff on Tumblr. I write on Reddit once in a while, and I'm on Twitter as @liesandarbor. We're working on right now finishing up our Sansa point of view. We're moving into Elaine Stone for a few chapters. And then after that, we have a very new point of view that we're excited about. We're not revealing quite yet, but soon, real soon.
And what you've done some Patreon-only Fire and Blood coverage too, is that right?
Yeah, we just finished up part 2 of Dance of the Dragons. That went up just a couple days ago for our December Patreon episode. We're probably going to end it with probably part 3 or part 4. Not 100% sure. That thing is in depth. There's a lot to get through. we finished our episode and we're like, oh my God, are you serious? There's still more? When do these people die? When does it end? But we're taking a break this month. We're going to do an Elaine Stone Winds of Winter and future Sansa chapter. Do that this month, and we'll be right back at that Dance of the Dragons next month.
More like Dance-a-thon of Dragons, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yes, whoever dances the longest wins. Okay, and Lady Gwyn, please tell us where to find you and your co-host out on the interwebs, and please tell everyone again what you're working on in case they missed it.
Okay, well, you can find us at radiowesteros.com or on Twitter at Radio Westeros. I am on Twitter personally at Lady Guinevere. We also have a Facebook page. Come on over and give us a like, give us a listen. The podcast can be found, like all podcasts, pretty much anywhere. iTunes, Spotify, Cast, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are, or I should say I am, at work on my episode on the Sorn Sword, which is a follow-up to The Hedge Knight, which we released about a month ago. And following that, you might be surprised to hear we're going to do the Mystery Night. Then
No way.
like, unexpected, I know.
From part
Then-
2 straight to part 3. What?
Yeah. Wow. Stunning development right there. Then, as you mentioned, working on the Dance of the Dragons coverage with you. That should be a lot of fun. That is progressing. When we get through all that, really what's up next for us is our Winds of Winter preview that
Ooh.
we've been at work on, and we're trying to have that lined up to be released prior to Winds of Winter coming out. So
Cool.
we have our plates full this year. A lot of good stuff planned.
Awesome. Yeah. 2019 is going to be another strong year for the fandom, even if we don't get the Winds of Winter, but I'm sure we're all hoping we do. But even if we don't, we've got plenty to go with. I want to say real quick before I do our Patreon credits and our outro that we got a really funny comment here from Piano Diva 11 who says, "What if John's real name is George?"
It was beneath our nose the entire time.
Dang it, he got us. Aegon is just short for George somehow. I don't know. You just the G and the E and the O are all in
It's
there.
all there. Yeah, it's all right there.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thanks for everybody who showed up live and participated in the chat. I saw a lot of big names from the fandom out there. I saw Eliana and LML and Joe Magician. I'm sure there were other people, but I was a little too busy to keep too much of an eye on it. But thank you everybody for coming. Let's see here. Some thanks. Thanks very much to ASOIAF for production, monitoring the chat, and handling all sorts of business behind the scenes. Thanks to Michael Klarfeld for our video intro, and thanks to Joey Townsend for the music. And thanks to our Patreon supporters. Thanks to Lord Mark of House Joseph, the Snow and Winterfell, rider of Mazlacartho, the white dragon with green scales, horns, wings, and talons. Jinx of House Lier, Green Queen of the Rainwood, Murmured Daughter of a Woods Witch, rider of Irigenia, the Sylphic albino dragon with amethyst eyes and opalescent wings. Mysterious BR is Hand of the King. The Smiling Wolf, Lord Stephen Stark of the Broken Tower, is soldier, scholar, philosopher, diplomat, hand of Queen Ashea, who is known as the best. Lady Suzanne Sinistral is the learned, holder of the left-handed Valyrian shears called Penance and Hand of the Beard. Lord Jim the Fortuitous is of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire and Warden of the West. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning is Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Cabeth the Unfrozen is Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light, Defender of the Old Gods, and Warden of the North. Lady Kelly McMath of Covington is Lady of the Villa Hills and Crescent Springs, Warden of the South. Lord James Tuttle is King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, Commander of the Royal Fleet, consisting of the Narrow Fleet, led by Flagship Caraxes, and the Bloodstone Fleet, led by Flagship Prince Daemon. Charlotte Auster is Corsair Queen of the Western Shivering Sea, Commander of the Briny Fleet, whose flagship is the Barnacle-encrusted Violet-hulled Mercenaria. She carries the nacre-inlaid Shucking Blade Crasslover. Our small council includes Lord James Inkblade, the Scholar Knight, Master of Whispers, Lord Robert Jacobs, Master of Coin, Lord Daniel the Sneaky Russian, Master of Ships, Grand Maester Via James, and Lord Benjen of House Hornwood, Master of Laws. Our lords and ladies in their castles include Lady Direliz of Castle Naki, the Alpha Patron, Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell, Breaker of the Second Stone. Lord Skip of the Veldt is Lord of Castle Ganges. Gregor the Toasty is Lord of the Bread Fort, the tastiest castle in the realm. Alicia Everlasting of the Green Blood is Lady of Desert Rose. Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate is Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass. Lord Garin de Haviland is of Devil's Hand Keep. Ashlyn Winter is the Hawk's Eye, Lady of Castle Skyfall. Lady Mikkel of Moonacre is leader of the Werewood Protectorate Alliance. The Lord of the Halls of Castle Hillcrest is wielder of the Valyrian steel machete Everglazed. Lord Alistair Whitaker is Lord of the Dawnhold. Lord Bemmy Snugglebunny is guardian of the hidden 100-acre Werewood, dual-wielding Glorious Morning and Little Lightwise. Brian the Defender is Lord of the Spearfort and the Freelands, last scion of Clan McCulloch, Strength and Courage. The Bastard of the Wolfswood is first Forester of the Old Gods, sworn to House Iron Werewood, listen for the silence. Connor the Dungeon Master, Lord of Catamount Keep and Guardian of the Smoky Mountain Pass. Lady Baelish, Dark Widow of Harrenhal. Lord Sidney Jesse, the Fallborn, Lord of Blue Spring. Nevessa the Twin-Hearted, suspected skin changer, holder of Castle Carahelm. Sir Valentin of House DeGen is creator of the Game of Predictions, free GOT predictions / futures market. Lady Lyanna Kelly of Wolf Island is protectress of the Steelhold. Casey Stark is of House Acres. And Lady Kay of House Archer is Lady of Earthdog Hall, Huntress of the Wolfswood, and Guardian of Maddie Squirrelsbane, the Mighty Direweenie. Our King's Justice is Sir Troy the Steady, wielder of the Valyrian Steelblade Fate. Our Queen's High Council includes Lady My Emerald Eyes, voice of House Swan, Mistress of Whispers. Rebea Star Eyes, Lady of Waves and Mistress of Ships, captain of the Iron Shadow Cat. Motto, in the shadows we bear our claws. And Grand Maester Elizabeth is middle daughter of Lyanna Mormont, first lady to forge both the Silver and Valyrian Steel link. We have Kingsguard, which includes Sir Dolores D, longest tenured White Sword. Willa Crowsbane, Guardian of White Tree, First Lady of the Free Folk. Sir Dean the White, Knight of the Black Star, and a few open slots. Our Queen's Guard is led by Lord Captain Commander Hayma Helminth. Happy name day, buddy. The same Sellsword Sentinel, also Lady Nymeria of House Seapurtle. Alexander of House Atreides from the seat of Dune. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Becca the Bard is Songbird of the North. Michonne the Melodious, Star of Old Town, Minds over Masters. Sir Rambo, Knight of House Gannon, First Blood. Sir Leon of House Walker, wielder of the twin Valyrian steel blades Fire and Ice and the Werewood bow Rain. How well equipped is that? Our Beard Guard includes Lord Commander George the Golden, Sir Joshua Oakhart the White Oak, Lady Rita of the Coppermane, the Unbound, Dance the Fervor, who got me some lovely Greyjoy shoes for Christmas. Thanks, Rita. Sir Jeff, Warden of the AC, wielder of Triad, the multifaceted beard of Platinum, Red, and Brown. Stay frosty. And Sir Tim Corgyle, Mad Boy of the Western Desert. Last but not least is the History of Westeros Night's Watch, which is led by... where'd he go? He's hiding. He's a very sneaky Night's Watchman. He is Lord Commander Benjen Umber, the Silent Giant, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Greatsword Winter's Kiss, and he is backed up by First Ranger Zachnafane Fourfeathers, fastest bow in the watch, First Builder Maegor Snow, a.k.a. Maegor the Cool, the Fire and the Snow, and First Steward Sir Jurion of the Torrentide, called Palewind. And now I can breathe. Thanks, everybody, very much for staying through all that. Thank you for attending. We'll see you hopefully next Tuesday at 6 p.m., same time, same place, same channel. And hopefully you can make our Crusader Kings stream this Friday, also at 6 p.m. Eastern, 11 GMT. Thanks again to my lovely guests with their great takes. We learned a lot, I hope. I certainly did. And we're eager to continue exploring Fire and Blood with you each week. So until next time, Valar re-read us or Valar re-listen us, and adios.